4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to 4321 podcast. My name is David Davis. I am your host. Today, I wanted to talk about an organization called the American Medical Association, the AMA abbreviation. I figure I want to talk about them because they're in the news right now, and I knew a lot about their history, but I think not a lot of people are aware of who they are and how they came into existence. And recently there was a report that they put out. It was a report to instruct doctors how to talk about the I like to call plandemic, or I have a friend, Dane Calloway, that calls it a damn gimmick. But it instructs them on how to speak and pretty much teaches them how to lie, what to say when you're being asked questions about certain things. So, but before I get into that, I figure let's go into the history of the AMA, who they are, and how they came into an existence. So let's go back. The AMA, American Medical Association. You can't mention them without mentioning Rockefeller, of course. And when you mention Rockefeller, most people know who he is. He's one of the wealthiest, richest families. One of the main families that pretty much run everything in the world. But let's talk about how they began to create the AMA. So Rockefeller controlled more than 90% of all the refineries in America with his company Standard Oil. But the company split into smaller companies such as like Chevron, Exxon, and Mobil. So he was an oil mogul. And so what he did is, during this time, scientists were experimenting. Right, this is in the early 1900s. But the AMA was actually created and founded in 1847. So they've been around for a while. But in the early 1900s, the scientists were experimenting with petrochemicals and refining that ways of creating chemical compounds from oil. Right, so they would use oil because he controlled most of the oil. So they would take oil and try to figure out other ways of using oil. They were using it in our foods. They call it petrochemicals. That was the same time that most of the essential vitamins and medicines were discovered. Vitamins like B1, B2, biotin, C, A, D. So they did research in labs and trying to create these same chemicals artificially, right? They look in nature and see what's the benefits of these natural vitamins and try to recreate them and make them artificially. Synthetic vitamin C was actually created in a lab in 1935 by them. So now that they can create pharmaceuticals in a lab using petrochemicals, Rockefeller took it upon himself to take advantage of and monopolize the oil, chemical, and medical industries all at the same time. And petrochemicals were able to be patented, which was important. So now they'd be able to control it and make profit from it. Because there's anything in nature you can't patent. It's not patentable. So it's important to know. So anything that you see being pushed, what they try to do, they take anything in nature, take any type of chemicals, take it apart and find out the benefits of that plant and try to bottle it or manipulate it. Excuse me. So that they'll be able to patent it to make profit from it. That's the only reason. And they wouldn't spend billions and millions of dollars to do research on natural ways and cures of things because they can't make money from it. So that's what they was able to do. And at this time, in the early 1900s, what people don't realize is that half the doctors and medical colleges of America were practicing holistic medicine, using knowledge from Europe, and Aboriginal Americans. So during this time, most doctors were actually, more than half of them were doing it the correct way that we've been doing, the way that we've been doing it for hundreds and thousands of years, effectively. So he had to create something called, and they use this now, this is a psychological tactic. It's called problem, reaction, solution. And the way you do that is, if I have the solution I want you to choose, I'm going to cause a problem for you to react and ask for my solution that I have already ready for you. And so that's what he did. So John D. Rockefeller in 1910 got together with a gentleman called Abraham Flexner, and they created a Flexner report. And so with the problem, reaction, solution, Rockefeller needed to re-educate the medical profession to prescribe more pharmaceutical drugs. So he hired this guy, Abraham Flexner, to travel the country and assess the success of American medical schools. Pretty much, I wouldn't say assess. Well, I guess he would say assess. We would go in and see what they're teaching and see how they will be able to manipulate that. So Flexner submitted a report to the Carnegie Foundation entitled Medical Education in the United States and Canada. Again, you can look this up. The Carnegie Foundation he sent this report to the Carnegie Foundation, and it was entitled Medical Education in the United States and Canada. And this explains that they were not pushing pretty much drugs, and that all the natural healing modalities being practiced for hundreds and thousands of years were pretty much unscientific quackery. That's quote, unscientific quackery. Flexner also was able to go in front of the Congress with the report and convince them that there must be a doorkeeper to allow certain medical schools in the circle and keep others out. So they're pretty much creating this monopoly, and then they needed a doorkeeper to allow certain doctors, certain schools, certain medical schools in their circle and doing what they pretty much tell them what to do. And it actually went through. So during this time, right after that, literally more than half of medical colleges were closed based on the Flexner report. So they just cleaning house. Anybody that was saying anything other than what they were trying to push, they were closed down. And the thing is, the AMA, they're not even a government entity. They're a private corporation. Like I said, they were created in 1847. So they're not even a government entity. Most people think they are. If they hear anything from the AMA, they figure it's from the government. But most things aren't governmental organizations. And they're one of them. We'll get into it in another podcast, but even the United States of America is a corporation. So everything, we're just dealing with corporations right now. So what happened was that it made it possible for them to label doctors who didn't prescribe drugs as charlatans and quacks. Medical schools, like I said, they that offered courses in natural therapies and homeopathy were told to either drop these courses from the curriculum or lose their accreditation. Right? So they're pressuring them to do this. They would contact and take over the medical schools by offering them tremendous amounts of money. And in return, they would ask that they allow the people on the boards, on their boards, to make sure their money is being used how they want it. So they would come in and sort of a bribery where they would give them millions of dollars. They still do this now. And the people of that corporation would be sitting on the boards of those schools, making sure that these decisions are being made and being pushed the way they want it to be. And they actually literally closed down medical schools for doctors of color, specifically, and has a history of doing vaginal surgery to women of color that were slaves without anesthesia. I can't even say that. It's a word I can't say. Anesthesia. So they have a very, very, very dark history of how they got started. I mean, the word pharmaceutical that they created If you look up pharmaceutical, it actually means witchcraft. So their history, their foundation is pretty dark. And there's a paradigm shift that happened where they started teaching pharmaceuticals over health. And it only took less than 20 years for the American Medical Association to be able to exclude empirics, educational practices, licensing laws, and to replace it with pretty much drugs and pharmaceuticals. So it only took them 20 years to create that paradigm shift, to change the way we teach and think about medicine. Now, I always tell people all the time, anything other than what they teach with drugs and pharmaceuticals, right now, today, we call it alternative medicine. So they was able to, through propaganda, switch the definition to make us, because medicine back then, before them, medicine was of the earth, the herbs, natural remedies. That was medicine. And so when they came along, they really were alternative. But they were able to switch it and flip it the other way and make us think and believe and be taught that alternative medicine is anything other than what they're teaching or pushing. So what they did is they had to get rid of all the competition, they launched a media campaign to pretty much destroy the competition and natural remedies. They call it quackery. You can read up all the articles and newspapers that they created and they pushed. Homeopathy and natural medicines were mocked and demonized, and doctors was even jailed during it. So Rockefeller had gotten together with the two other moguls, Carnegie and Morgan. Carnegie was killing the steel industry, and Morgan, the banking industry. So they combined their money and they monopolized the industry. They led the financing of surgery, radiation, and synthetic drugs that they were creating. And like I said, Rockefeller gave a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars to colleges and hospitals founded, and he also founded a philanthropic front group called General Education Board, or GEB, you can look up. And that's what they usually do. They create philanthropy groups or companies, and that's where they would do their business, to make it seem like they're giving money and donating, but they're not donating, they're actually paying off and controlling. So like I said, once he created this philanthropist company, they was able to fund all these colleges. And when they did that, they streamlined all the students, streamlined all the colleges. So all the students were learning pretty much the same thing, same script, same information, and teaching them that medicine was all about using patented drugs. Even scientists were given big grants to study how plants cure diseases and identify the chemicals in the plant that was effective. And so they would look at, like I said, find out what people are using naturally and experiment with it to find out what was in those plants or herbs that was effective, and they try to recreate it and make a synthetic version of it so that they'd be able to patent it and make money from it. So instead of going to the source of where they try to emulate it, which is nature, they create something fake and synthetic to make money from it, and then push it to say that that's what we have to take. I believe their slogan back in the day was "A pill for nil." So the result of all this is doctors and practitioners that went to school really know nothing about the benefits of nutrition, herbs, or any other holistic practices that have always worked and even more effective. And we have a society that was pretty much have been and still being indoctrinated to be enslaved to corporations for the corporation's well-being. So this paradigm shift happened, and I remember going to what hospital was it? I think it was John Hopkins. I might be saying I might be. I think it was that. It was. I know it was a big hospital in Massachusetts years ago, and there was a girl I was dating that had they would say it was an autoimmune disease. They kept on changing. Doctors kept on changing the name of it. It was lupus. It was this. It was that. And I remember them having her take these different types of drugs all the time. And I went with her to Johns Hopkins because that was a big hospital. They supposedly knew what they were doing. So I sat there doing their whole checkup, and the doctor, and I told her before we went in, I said, all they're gonna do is just tell you to take a drug. You know, they don't know anything about what this is. It's an experiment with you. So we went in, and that was exactly what was happening. And I remember having this, I won't say a debate or argument, but I always like to challenge the doctors when I would ask questions. And so I remember him saying that he wanted to give her this new steroid. And I was like, so what is this new steroid? He said, what do you mean it's new? So it's a new steroid that was given for them to try and see what happens. So he had no idea what was going to happen. He didn't know that, you know, it was going to work, but he was going to try out some things. And I asked him about what the side effects were. And he was telling me all the side effects. He tried to, you know, make it seem like it wasn't a big deal. It was safe. And so we started getting to the conversation. I said, well, what is it trying to emulate? I was asking what natural, because every drug is trying to emulate something in nature. Ended up being, he ended up fessing up and saying, listen, he said, I'm a doctor. He said that I'm trained and taught about pharmaceuticals, drugs. He admitted to say that he's trained to find out what the problem is and then or the symptoms of things and try to match it up with a drug that may help with that symptom. So he actually fessed up to that, and I was like, well, okay. I was able to walk out. We didn't take that drug, of course, and she got a lot better doing other things, what they call alternatively. But a lot of times it's not really the doctor's fault in a sense, because I used to always use the analogy of fast food industry is, of course, unhealthy, and it's very bad. It's killing a lot of people, a lot of our kids. And arguing and debating with doctors like I used to do, I don't do that anymore, but I found that by doing that, it's like going into McDonald's and arguing with the manager of that McDonald's. That they're not controlling. It's the system that's pretty much dictating for them, you know, to get a job, to work. So they're like us. So I mean, I respect doctors. There's nothing wrong with. I think doctors are great, especially the people. We have to kind of separate who they are, their human side, to what they're what they're a part of. I don't think a lot of them know what they're part of. I think now there's a growing number of doctors that are aware of what's going on, but a lot of them are afraid of speaking up or doing anything because obviously they can lose their job, lose their practice, their license, and so they won't talk about what the truth is out of fear. So Rockefeller, he actually created the American Cancer Society in 1913. So it's all around the same time they were setting this all up. Right now, America spends more than 15% to its GDP on healthcare, which is really the opposite. It should be called sick care. There's nothing health that they're pushing at all. Zero. And it focuses more on what they're doing right now. They're focusing more on cures or not on cures. And the main thing that they're focusing on now is just symptoms and creating repeat customers. Because if you think about it right now, the medical industry, that since they've been in existence, what cures have they created? There's no cure for cancer, diabetes, autism, asthma, or even the flu. But there are many natural remedies that have all these, that with all these sicknesses and more, that have cured. And cured is a word that they won't even allow you to say. But they can say. It's just really crazy how they come in and change things and control what you're able to say, even if it is the truth. Anything that people use that are natural remedies that you're cured from, they're all suppressed by the same corporations and that monopolize the industry for profit. So I like to call the systems controlled by oligarchs and plutocrats, not doctors. So we can't get mad at the doctor sometimes. We just got to figure out where the information, who's controlling them, who's telling them what to say and what to do. Interesting story about Rockefeller. His father used to sell snake oil and plant tonics and elixirs. I read that his introduction to people when he met them was he would say, "I am Dr. Bill Livingston, celebrated cancer specialist." But he was his snake oil was selling for like $25 a bottle, which back then was like 2 months' salary of an average American. So he was taking advantage of people. His father, so you kind of know where that comes from. So Rockefeller's empire with Chase Manhattan Bank, which is now J.P. Morgan, they own half or more than half of the pharmaceutical interest in the United States. It's the largest drug manufacturer in the world. So I can guarantee, I won't say I can guarantee, I can almost guarantee. If you go into any hospital right now with any ailment, I don't care what it is, headache, a bump, you're going to walk out of there with some type of subscription to a drug, because that's all they're trained to do. It all started from the beginning. The AMA is the American Medical Association is the entity that controls what doctors do and say. And I say because before they would train the doctors on what to do, but now they're training them what to say. Like I said, with this new report that they came out with during this whole pandemic, trying to instruct doctors on what to say and how to talk about it. I'm going to read you some of the examples out of this report. You can go and find the report and download it, but I have the report and I took some things out of it to talk about. It's pretty crazy. It's something that you could read out of a movie that they would actually do this. But so for some of the social media templates that were given, it states this, and I quote, "Even with the vaccine, we need to keep using masks to stop the new spread. Hashtag COVID-19. Hashtag mask up." This is what then telling the doctors what to say on social media. Another one for them to say is, "Facts, logic, and compassion require us to do our part. Get vaccinated. Hashtag COVID-19. These are things that I remember seeing people saying, and this is where it came from. This came out in, what time? When did this report come out? It was in 2021, I believe, early 2021. This report that the AMA sent out to all the doctors and hospitals. Another quote for them is that they told them, instructed the doctors to say, and how to do interviews is, "I trust a vaccine endorsed by scientists, career public health professionals, my doctor, and the mainstream medical community. Hashtag trust science." And I remember having conversations with people, and it was like, I'm trusting science. I'm going with science. And I'm like, why do they keep repeating the same thing? People are saying the same thing. Because I don't watch really the news. I don't get it. If I do, I purposely watch it to see what their plan is, but kind of see it in a different, the truth for what it really is. But people were saying the same thing. Like, wow, this is how, and then now I'm reading this. I'm like, wow. So that's what it was. So it was some type of media campaign as far as promoting. And this is what they did. They actually trained and programmed people to say the same thing. Trust science. There is also to stall, like say if there's a doctor being interviewed, so to stall in the interview, right, they were instructed to ask to repeat the question and then say, quote, "I'm glad you asked," and then they instruct them to say go into what you wanted to say. So you ask them to repeat the question, you're stalling, you say, "I'm glad you asked," and then, after that they go into some other rhetoric that didn't even answer the question. How to deflect. They were instructed how to deflect in an interview. That's when somebody they're being asked a question or a challenging question, they'll say, quote, "That's a misperception, but the reality is blah, 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 blah. And I remember taking some courses on selling, right? And one of the strategies of selling is that if somebody gives you a reason why they didn't want to buy, or any excuse, you wouldn't want to battle that. What you would say is feel, felt, found, which is something called feel, felt, found, where if somebody says, I think it's a little expensive too, I can't afford it. You say, I know how you feel. I know exactly how you feel. I felt the same way when I first blah, 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 blah. But what I found, blah, blah, blah. Feel, felt, found. So that's the strategy that people use for sales. Because when you say, I know how you feel, now you making that person feel like, okay, he sees what I'm saying. I felt the same way. So it makes them feel like, okay, so you agree with me. But what I found, blah, boom, the bomb. Now you just crushed whatever that excuse was. So those are like little strategies that, psychological strategies that people use for sales. And this is what they're using for media control. Those psychological strategies. Political strategies. Let's read some more of these. These are pretty cool. To steer the conversation elsewhere, they are instructed to say, quote, I don't have the details on that, but what I know is blah, blah, blah. You've heard that numerous times. The AMA actually calls for the elimination of all non-medical exemptions from vaccines, and also calls for the medical profession to prioritize Blacks and Latinx individuals in developing coronavirus treatments. That is de facto racial discrimination. What else? The AMA oversees that. This is the one of the what's the word I'm looking for? One of the things, the reasons why they're so powerful and why doctors have to do whatever the AMA says, because they oversee the licensing of all state boards for American medical doctors. So the doctors have to follow the guidelines. These guidelines that's being told to them, right? These are guidelines that the AMA sent to them. They had to follow these guidelines, or they'd be in jeopardy of losing their jobs or their license. So now you don't understand why these doctors are following through. Not all. There's a lot of doctors are stepping forward. You're not hearing about thousands walking out of the job or battling or suing or they're fighting back, but you're not going to hear about that because the pharmaceutical companies actually control the media. So the news that you're watching right now, I don't care if it's ABC to Fox or CNN, all the alphabet, they're all being controlled by pharmaceutical companies. So they're not going to allow you to see what you're seeing in the news is what they want you to hear and see. Let's do another quote from the guideline. They say, instead of saying hospital rates in your interview or on social media, use the word deaths. So they literally asking them or telling them to lie. So anytime you hear the word deaths on in the media, now you know they're being instructed to say death and hospital deaths and replace for just hospital rates, or hospital visits. So if they say, there were 50,000 hospital rates or hospitalizations, that's being replaced by deaths. So if you say, you're not going to hear too much of hospitalizations, you're going to hear the word deaths. Another one is, instead of saying get the vaccine, it's the right thing to do, say instead, getting the vaccine, it will keep you safe. I've seen that. That's like the new thing now. It'll keep you safe. And which is crazy because now they admit that it doesn't do anything. I don't even call it a vaccine. It's called gene therapy, which I'm going to go into another episode, but it's gene therapy, and that's their word, their definition of it. It has nothing to do with a vaccine, but they use the word vaccine psychologically because you think a vaccine is having a safe vaccine as a kid. Even those aren't safe. But psychologically, it makes you feel like it's okay. It's called a vaccine, but it's not. It's by all definition of what a vaccine is. This is absolutely nothing, has nothing to do with. It's not one part of a vaccine, the definition of a vaccine, that these things have, except by using a needle. Let's read another one. What we got here? Oh, so what you might see is like with interviews, like most doctors that are asked about research or real data in lab, things that are being investigated and reports by scientists from around the world and doctors. If you might see a doctor on TV or on the news being asked about these numbers, the real facts, the real truths about it, or about not taking, they might use these tactics I'm telling you right now as far as deflecting, and they go right into the whole spiel of what the AMA says. It's crazy how if you see these interviews now, you can see them actually do it. Like they won't even mention the reports that they're being asked about. They say, "Oh, yeah, I've seen those reports. I read those reports, but what I found is that they're not blah blah blah," and they give total answers that are, I say subjective, but they're like opinionated about what they think, nothing backed by anything that they found scientifically. And they were going back into the spiel of deflecting into pushing them to taking the vaccines or something called remdesivir, which is a drug that wasn't even okayed by the FDA, which is the FDA is whole nother story, but it wasn't even okayed or by the FDA before this whole pandemic happened, and right after the pandemic, then it gets okayed from the FDA, and it's incredibly dangerous. There's a book called by Tony Fauci called The Real Anthony Fauci. You have to read; it's incredible. But it has all the documented information about the research on remdesivir, but that's Tony Fauci's drug that he makes his millions of dollars from, and so that's why he's pushing it. Cause that's what. But it's the facts, the truth, the data on all the deaths and the problem that it caused is incredible. It's ridiculous. It's amazing that that this guy's not even in jail yet, I say. But yeah, so when you start seeing these interviews, start paying attention to some of the things and how they answer these questions, and you start recognizing what we're talking about tonight. Another thing that they try to say, they change the terminology and the wording is, instead of saying lockdowns, say stay at home order, which I've seen that, heard that. Instead of saying national duty, say personal responsibility. Instead of equality, say equity. Don't say minority, say historically marginalized. Man, this is funny. These are all words that sound Marxism, like very individualism, and it's problematic, and expose property rights. So a lot of stuff going on right now, and it's I just wanted to bring up the American Medical Association because not a lot of people know who they are, the AMA. And if you look at I asked you to look them up and research who they are, dig into them, and you can validate all the information I'm giving to you right now. And I'm saying this just to make people aware. You might not agree with everything I'm saying, but I'm trying to give information that documented truths. So something that, and I might give my opinions here and there, but I'm trying not to do that as much. Most of what I want to talk about and explain or just share is information that there's receipts for, meaning that there's documentation to show. I'm not that smart to make up my own little facts, but I might have my little opinions on things, but those opinions are based on truths. And those are the facts. Those I don't even like facts. I like to say truths over facts, because facts can be manipulated. And I always say, truths don't need updates. Facts, you can always update facts. So on that's going to be it for me today. I just wanted to give you guys a a little heads up on the American Medical Association, AMA, and who they are, how they were founded, the players that were involved, why they were created, and their role on this sticky web. Everything that this society is like a web. So many different connections and so many different parts of it, but they're all connected. And so, sort of with the medical part of it, the AMA plays a big part of that. So now you know. All right, so that's going to be it for me today. I'd like to thank you guys for hanging out, listen to me talk, rant, and I won't say rant. I didn't do much ranting, but help me listen to me talk. Appreciate you guys. Please share, let people know, give them this information, make them aware so that just be more aware of what's going on. And I always say that if you're aware of something, you can respond. If you're not aware of something, that's when you react. And so we have to stop reacting when things happen and become more aware and learned and understand who the enemy is, what the enemy is. Great book to read is The Art of War that explains this. You learn and study the enemy so that when you face with whatever they do, you can respond, not react. And so this will hopefully help you respond as opposed to react now. All right. So my name is David Davis. This is 4321 Podcast. I'm out. Peace.